Well, the government continues to push vaccine recommendations for pregnant women, despite the fact that pregnant women were excluded from clinical trials. So, what the heck is going on here? Why are they continuing to push on a population when there is no reliable safety data to weigh their decisions upon? Highly respected MIT professor and an expert on drug safety analytics is Retsef Levi, and he joins me now. Professor, good to see you again. Welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Clayton, for having me on the show. I think this is another example of really reckless policies that, for some reason, regulatory authorities are keep pushing in spite of many, many warning signals.
So why are these governments continuing to push this? Why is this happening?
So just to put it in context, I think that if you look traditionally if you look at policies regarding drugs, new vaccines, there is usually very special care when it comes to pregnant women. In fact, by and large, we don't let women take any drug during pregnancy unless it's really, really a necessity. Now, in this case, it's even worse because, as you mentioned, the pregnant women were excluded from the original trial. And nevertheless, without any safety data, shortly after the vaccination campaign started, health authorities recommended to pregnant women to go and get vaccinated, sometimes recommending that it will happen only in the third or the second trimester. But nevertheless, this was done based on no safety data. In fact, Pfizer was asked by the EMA, the European Regulatory Authority, to conduct a study on pregnant women. And this study was supposed to enroll thousands of women and then end up only with a few hundreds. And it actually they concluded the trial in mid-2022, and we still did not get any data from these trials. So there's a very strange phenomena that there is no safety on one hand, and even the safety data that is presumably available seems to actually not to be reported to the public. And this is in spite of very, very concerning signals. We know by now that these vaccines have major impact on the reproductive system of women, in the sense that we know that there are many, many women reporting about menses irregularities, sometimes very long-term ones, very serious ones. So that's almost by design means that there is some hormonal impact on the woman body that we still don't understand fully what it is, but it should keep us very, very concerned. But in addition, there are also at least a few studies that show sperm quality reduction for men when compared before and after vaccination. So we see even impact there. And again, the mechanism is not clear yet, but that should give you another reason to be very concerned. There is a potential impact on both fertility and as well as specifically on pregnancy outcomes. Now, the reason or what regulatory authorities are telling us, hey, we don't need to report the data from the clinical trials, or we report it in a very, very cumbersome way that you cannot understand what's going on there, other than, again, see very concerning signals. But don't worry, we have conducted multiple retrospective studies, and everything seems to be okay because the vaccinated women and the unvaccinated women seem to have similar outcomes when it comes, for example, for preterm deliveries. These are deliveries that happen before week 37, or stillbirths, for the sake of the matter. Now, what I think is that, and this is something fundamentally important, is that all of these studies are fundamentally biased. And in fact, when you look at them in the right way, you should actually be more concerned and reassured, like they try to, like the message that they try to pertain. And I would like to explain this to the viewers. Why are they so biased?
Please. Yeah, let's explain why these biases in these studies. And for instance, because too many of these COVID vaccine supporters have been pointing to these observational studies, right? Observational studies versus RCT studies. Can you explain the difference between these and why the mainstream media latches on to the observational studies to support their claims?
Well, I mean, randomized control experiment is the best quality evidence that we have. Women are randomly assigned for treatments. In this case, it will be vaccinated versus not vaccinated. And in a pregnancy trial, a trial that is specifically focused on pregnant women, like they were supposed to conduct, these will be pregnant women, and then you're going to follow them prospectively throughout their pregnancy and document any adverse events, any outcomes that they had, and you will be able to get a fair comparison uh, between women that were vaccinated and women that were not vaccinated. This is not going to be perfect because you still don't have an idea necessarily about the long-term impact, but it's much better than any retrospective study that is almost always is going to be subject to many biases. What I'm going to talk about, though, is a fundamental bias that they have to consider and they don't consider. And in order to illustrate this to the viewers, I would like to give a completely different example and then fall back to the setting of pregnant women being vaccinated versus not. So, think about the marathon. It's a 42-kilometer race, and let's think about thinking about the risk or the chances of marathon runners starting the race at the get going to finish the race. Okay, and let's also assume that on the 40-kilometer, there is a station in which the runners could pick up a cup of water, right? And now I'm asking you, hey, I'm going to look on all the runners that picked up a cup of water, and I'm going to ask myself, what is the risk that they will not finish the race, right? So I think it's going to be quite obvious to people that if I look on all the runners starting the race versus just the runners that picked up a cup of water in the 40th kilometer, the latter should have a much better chance to finish the race. Why is that?
Right.
It's not because of the cup of water. It's just because by picking up the cup of water, we know that they arrived to the 40-kilometer and they just have 2 more kilometers to go, right? In fact, if I
Right.
would tell you that the rate of runners that didn't finish the race among the people that picked up the cup of water is equal to the fraction of people that started the race that did not finish the race, you will start be very concerned that this cup of water is not that innocent, that maybe it actually has very negative impact on the runners. So what is the analogy, right? The analogy is that all of the studies that are out there currently look on a fixed period of time, and they look on all the births on that period of time, and they try to look on births by vaccinated women and births by unvaccinated women and compare them. Unfortunately, what they don't consider is that this is a period in time in which the women are actually vaccinated, and we know, and this is there is a lot of data about this, that most women vaccinated very late in their pregnancy. Almost all of them were vaccinated after the first trimester, and most of them, or many of them, vaccinated in the third trimester. Now, this is really equivalent to picking up a cup of water for the following reason. When you think about the risk of having a stillbirth, for example, or the risk of having an early birth, it's clearly decreasing over time, right? If you tell me that the woman arrived to her week 32 or 33, the risk of stillbirth is now significantly reduced, right? So when you actually compare women that were vaccinated to women that were not vaccinated, you're exactly comparing women that picked up the cup of water, because the fact that they were vaccinated means that they actually arrived to a very late gestational age, versus the unvaccinated women that they are equivalent to the runners at the beginning of the race. You don't have any idea about them. And then you tell me, oh, they have the same outcomes, and you tell me that that's reassuring. That's actually quite the opposite of reassuring, but because you would expect that when you do such an analysis, you should see significantly fewer bad outcomes among the vaccinated women compared to the unvaccinated women, even if you assume that the vaccine is completely neutral, not because the vaccine impact, but just because the mere fact that vaccinated women had to get to arrive to a late stage of their pregnancy. So this is not a fair comparison by design, and it's even worse. It's even worse because let's just go back to the marathon example. Suppose that every single runner that arrived to the station would pick up a cup of water, right? Uh, and I'm going to do this comparison between the people that started the race and people that just picked up a cup of water. Essentially, all the people that started the race and did not pick up a cup of water had to finish the race before they did not finish the race, because they did not even arrive to the 40-kilometer. So if most women vaccinated it's not only that you bias the vaccinated women positively, you are biasing the unvaccinated women negatively. And when you look on all of these studies, this is out there. This is one of the fundamental biases. There are other biases that they don't consider. Typically, for example, what are the characteristics of the population of women that vaccinated versus the women that did not vaccinate? And I think that this is another example when academic journals are letting people publishing good results that fit the narrative, that have a fundamental flaw, methodological flaw, that once considered, you actually becoming much more concerned than reassured. The problem is that if you try now to report this to the journals, you're not likely to get any attention, because people don't want to have any result, any indication that contradicts the narrative that everything is safe and effective. I really think that when it comes to pregnancy outcomes, uh, we have to go back to the basics. We never give women during pregnancy any drug unless it's absolutely necessary. At this point, I don't see how someone claims that this is necessary or even remotely necessary to give pregnant women any vaccine, especially not this particular vaccine against COVID-19 during pregnancy. This is just reckless. And what is even more disturbing is the fact that they don't reveal the data that they have from the clinical trials, and they rely on studies that are completely flawed. And I'm speaking about this in a Twitter message that post that I
Yeah.
posted recently. People are invited to watch it. There are two videos. One is short and one is longer, that explains in more details the bias that I just kind of outlined to you.
And then also we have, I'll get you out of here on this, Professor, which is this new study that just came out, was published in the Lancet Medical Journal, which reviewed 65 prior studies that concluded that infection can be considered inoculation, so therefore natural immunity. And not only did natural exposure provide immunity to the vaccines, as well as the vaccines, it also provided protection against severe disease for all variants. It's always convenient that we're now hearing about this, and yet we knew about this years ago.
Clayton, I have to. People have to understand. In June 2021, we are talking about almost 2 years ago. I was actually citing data that the CDC posted on their website that showed exactly what you just described. That natural immunity not only provides long-term, robust protection against infection and particularly against severe illness, but in addition, that vaccination does not add to natural immunity. It does not add additional protection. And in fact, it does add some more risks in terms of side effects. I think that we know that if you are vaccinated after infections, or getting infected after being vaccinated, potentially because there is cumulative exposure to the toxic spike protein, you are more likely to experience either a severe illness or major side effects. So again, what is amazing here is that the CDC publishing data and then their conclusions are completely opposite to the numbers and the data that they put out there. I mean, in some cases, they put data that is completely manipulated. But what is even more shocking, that even when they put data that is clearly sending one message, the bottom line and the recommendation is going exactly the opposite direction. And that's really, really disturbing. When people talk a lot about misinformation, we need to worry about this as a major problem. I'm very worried that some of the regulatory authorities' data that is being put there, and more so even the analysis of the data, are completely, in my mind, often can fall very naturally into the category of misinformation.
It's unbelievable, because we reported this at the time, and we were banned from YouTube. We were pulled off the platform for using those words in their terms of service. They literally talked about you couldn't talk about this. You couldn't talk about
the fact that maybe the virus was generated in a lab and leaked up until maybe 3 days ago, 4 days ago, when it became the truth or the formal version of the government. So wait wait 6 months. I think you're going to be fine. It
Yeah.
just but the whole concept of misinformation is very destructive, and the reason why it's destructive is at some point you have to get to the point of who gets to decide what misinformation is. Um,
Right. The
Galileo
gatekeepers.
Galilei, when Galileo Galilei claimed that the Earth surrounds the sun and the Earth is rounded, right? At that point, he was considered as spreading misinformation. We
Right.
know now that, well, luckily he was insisting about the truth. So, I think that there's no better way to have an open scientific debate and having all the opinions until the evidence is pointing to what is the truth. And what is happening over the last 3 years, that centralized organizations with a lot of interests, tech companies, governments, that have an interest and they are committed to certain narratives are trying to dictate to us what information is and what misinformation is. I think we should let scientists and let the evidence being shown. And I think I trust the wisdom of the crowd. People know at the end what is good for them. And I think we need to trust that. That's the basic principle of democracies.
Hallelujah. Well said. Professor, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for your great wisdom in all of this. And people will link up your Twitter feed as well so people can dive more deeply into some of the data surrounding the studies specifically. They can see some of the deeper slides on this. Professor, great to see you. Thanks so much for joining us once again.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you so much for watching this segment here at Redacted. We are live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, trying to share the stories that the mainstream media will not cover. You should also come over and join our community of Redacted Rebels over at redacted.inc. That's our private locals community where we can share exclusive content that we simply cannot share here on YouTube. Come over and join the rebellion together right now by going to redacted.inc. We'll see you next time.